Now there is a video going around on the internet, on the WhatsApp, on the social media that makes a high-flying claim from the Jewish people. Let's watch.
Some say the world should boycott Israel. If you're one of them, you should know this would be a mission impossible in the West. That's because Israeli technology is everywhere. When you get up in the morning, get into your car and drive to work, you probably use Waze to avoid traffic. Waze was developed in Israel. If your eyes stray from the road for a moment, you will promptly be warned by your mobile eye safety system, another Israeli development. Your workday is stressing you out. Your smartwatch will monitor your pulse and remind you to slow things down a little, thanks to an electro-optic sensor developed in Israel.
Yes, some technology, it was developed by the Jews. However, a bulk of the technology, the education, the economy, the culture that the Jewish people take for granted, they were borrowed from the Muslim inventions and the Muslim discoveries. Let's take a look at some of them, inshallah. Almost every skyscraper in the world, may that be the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa, or the high-rise building of downtown Tel Aviv, they all borrowed the technology, the tubular frame construction that was initially invented by a Muslim engineer, structural engineer, by the name of Dr. Fazlur Rahman. So hey, Jewish people of Israel, you're using and borrowing a technology that was made by a Muslim. Now, Israel claims that it is one of the strongest economies in the world. However, when you look into their banking system, it is dependent upon the printing, the writing, and the cashing of the checks. 3 trillion checks were processed in the world in the year 2020, and millions of them in Israeli banking system. So, hey, Israeli government, the checks that you are using today in the modern world were invented in the 9th century, yes, you guessed it, by the Muslims. Now, 99% of the cars which are driven all over the world, and that includes the Jewish people using the cars to travel on the Jewish superhighway from the illegal settlements to Tel Aviv and different parts of Israel, they all use the internal combustion engine. And the internal combustion engine, it is dependent on the crankshaft. And the crankshaft, lo and behold, it was invented by a Muslim Arab engineer by the name of Al-Jazari in the 12th century. So hey, Jewish people, when you hop into the car, do not forget to thank the Muslims. What about the DSLR cameras and the cell phone cameras used by the Israelis? The Greeks, they used to believe that our eyes actually emitted the rays that enabled us to see. But this was the wrong assumption. Not until the 10th century, a Muslim by the name of Ibn al-Haytham, a physicist, he corrected the Greeks and the rest of the world by mentioning that actually the rays of light, they entered the eyes rather leaving it. And he invented the first pinhole camera after noticing the way light came through the hole in a window shutters. The smaller the hole, the better the picture he worked out, and set up the very first camera obscura upon which the modern cameras are built. And the video that you saw by the Jewish people, they used the technology they borrowed from the Muslim physicist Ibn al-Haytham. All over Israel, Jewish kids in school, students in colleges and universities, they cannot live without learning about algebra, a field of math perfected by a Muslim mathematician by the name of Al-Khwarizmi in the 8th century from Baghdad. And oh yes, the video that the Jewish people made, and to edit the video, they use a computer. And the computer technology could not have been possible if not for the Muslim mathematicians who developed and perfected the math behind it. Let's hear it from Kali Fayarina, who was the CEO of HP.
And this Muslim civilization was driven more than anything by invention. Its architects designed buildings that defied gravity, and its mathematicians created algebra and algorithms that would enable the building of computers and the creation of encryption.
So for all the computers that are used all over Israel, they are borrowing a technology that was made by Muslims. Science majors all across Israel, they rely upon and they use the instruments of the flask, the test tube, the cylinders in the chemistry labs. And they owe a big debt to the Muslim chemist Jabir ibn Hayyan, inventor of these instruments. Hospitals as we have today with specialties in various fields, specialized departments, surgery, pediatrics, psychiatry, OBGYN, were first developed by Muslims in Baghdad, Cairo and Damascus. As Israeli citizens benefit from modern hospitals, they should thank the Muslims. The Chaim Sheba Medical Center in Tel Aviv is the largest hospital in all of Israel. 31,000 cardiac and inpatient procedures are done in this hospital each year. The surgical instruments used in Israel and all over the world were initially invented by Abul al-Qasim al-Zahrawi, a Muslim surgeon from the 11th century Spain. So every individual, every family, every hospital in Israel who benefited from these instruments, they should thank the Muslim surgeon, Abul al-Qasim al-Zahrawi. There are approximately 1900 pharmacies in Israel, and every patient who benefits from these pharmacies should thank the Muslims who established the very first modern pharmacies initially in the year 754 in Baghdad under the Abbasid dynasty. Now this is the graduating seasons for the graduating students all across the world and the 60 colleges and universities in Israel. These graduating students will be receiving their associate, bachelor's and master's and PhD degrees, each of these students in Israel and around the world should thank the Muslims who initiated the concept of granting degrees after completing a set curriculum. So hey Jewish youth, joyously take the degree in your hand, you should thank the Muslims. So the digits that you press or touch to make the calls, for your information, they're not called as the Hebrew or the Yiddish numerals. They're not called the English numerals, they're not called the Roman numerals, they're called the Arabic numerals, perfected and exported by Muslims to the rest of the world. Now after hearing a long list of inventions and discoveries, you may be a bit overwhelmed. You want to get a cup of coffee and relax. But for your information, yep, that coffee in your hand, it was made by Muslims. Muhammad Kaldi, a Muslim goat herder, discovered the coffee beans and then Muslims exported the coffee to the rest of the world, including the Jewish people. So hey Jewish people, almost every fabric of your life, your civilization and your culture is dependent on the technology, dependent on the inventions that you borrowed from the Muslims. But why stop at all the technology that you borrowed from the Muslims? Even the land that you're standing on, a bulk of it, it was borrowed from the Muslims. I pray for the freedom of Palestine and for the justice and loving peace to all of humanity. Ameen.